The birth of wisdom. Solomon, the son of David and Bathsheba, was destined for greatness. Even before his birth, a prophecy had foretold that he would rule with wisdom unparalleled by any before or after him. Born into the golden age of Israel, he was raised within the grandeur of King David's court, absorbing the lessons of leadership, justice, and faith. His father David was a mighty warrior and a man after God's own heart. Yet he was also a king burdened with the weight of his own past mistakes. Solomon grew up witnessing his father's triumphs and failures, shaping his understanding of the complexities of leadership. David's love for Solomon was evident. Though he had many sons, it was Solomon whom he favored for the throne. This was not just out of paternal affection, but because of a divine promise that Solomon would bring peace to Israel. Unlike his father, who had spent much of his reign in battles and conquests, Solomon's destiny was one of prosperity and wisdom. He was often found in the palace libraries, poring over sacred texts, learning from the scribes, and engaging in discussions with the elders. His keen mind was evident from a young age, and many in the court whispered that he was no ordinary child. However, Solomon's rise to power was not without challenge. As David aged, tensions brewed within the royal household. His elder brother Adonijah, ambitious and headstrong, sought to claim the throne for himself. He gathered support from key officials and even held a feast to declare himself king. But Bathsheba, Solomon's mother, and the prophet Nathan intervened. They reminded David of his promise to make Solomon king, and with urgency, David acted. In a dramatic turn, Solomon was anointed as king before the eyes of the people, securing his position before Adonijah could seize power. The air was thick with tension as the kingdom watched. Adonijah's ambitions crumbled, and Solomon, though young, was now the ruler of Israel. Despite his youth, Solomon understood the magnitude of his responsibilities. The kingdom had flourished under David, but it was not without its divisions and unrest. His father's conquests had expanded the borders, but Solomon's task was to maintain and strengthen the kingdom through wisdom rather than war. He sought counsel from the elders, priests, and trusted advisors, yet he knew that human wisdom alone would not be enough. His heart longed for divine guidance. It was with this deep yearning that Solomon made his journey to Gibeon, a sacred place where the tabernacle of the Lord still stood. There, amidst the flickering light of the sacrificial flames, he offered 1,000 burnt offerings. The aroma of the offerings filled the night air, and in the silence, Solomon prayed. He did not ask for a long life, victory over his enemies, or wealth beyond measure. Instead, he humbly asked for wisdom to govern his people with righteousness and understanding. That night, as he slept, the Lord appeared to him in a dream. The divine presence was overwhelming, yet there was no fear in Solomon's heart. God's voice echoed through his soul, asking, "What shall I give you?" Solomon's answer was simple, yet profound. "Give your servant an understanding heart to judge your people, that I may discern between good and evil." Pleased with his selfless request, God granted him wisdom beyond any man before or after him. But that was not all. Because Solomon had not asked for riches or long life, God bestowed upon him wealth, honor, and the promise that if he remained faithful, his reign would be blessed beyond measure. The next morning, Solomon awoke, forever changed. He returned to Jerusalem with a newfound clarity, ready to lead with the wisdom granted to him. The journey of his reign had just begun, and the world would soon witness the brilliance of Israel's wisest king. He immediately demonstrated his newfound wisdom by establishing a just system of governance. His first great test came when two women came before him with a dispute over a baby. Each claimed to be the mother, and there were no witnesses to prove the truth. Solomon, understanding human nature, proposed to divide the child in two, giving each woman half. The true mother, overcome with love, cried out and begged to give up the baby rather than see it harmed. Solomon declared her the rightful mother, and the news of his wisdom spread throughout the land. Under his leadership, Israel entered an era of peace and prosperity. He organized his administration efficiently, appointing capable officials to oversee different aspects of governance. He divided the kingdom into 12 districts, each responsible for supplying the royal household with provisions for 1 month out of the year. This system ensured fairness and efficiency in the kingdom's operations. Solomon's wisdom was not limited to judicial matters. He also demonstrated an unparalleled understanding of nature, science, and philosophy. He spoke of trees from the great cedars of Lebanon to the smallest hyssop that grew out of walls. He studied animals, birds, creeping things, and fish, compiling knowledge that would be revered for generations. Kings and scholars from distant lands came to hear his teachings and seek his counsel. In addition to his intellectual pursuits, Solomon sought to elevate Israel as a center of trade and commerce. He formed alliances with neighboring nations, securing peace and economic prosperity. He established a powerful navy with the help of the Phoenicians and sent expeditions to distant lands, bringing back gold, silver, ivory, and rare spices. The wealth of Israel grew exponentially, and its influence extended beyond its borders. Yet, amid his grandeur, Solomon never forgot the divine promise that had been given to him. He led the nation in worship and oversaw the construction of the first temple in Jerusalem, a monumental task that would become his greatest legacy. The temple would serve as the dwelling place of God's presence, a beacon of faith for the people of Israel. Craftsmen from Tyre, skilled laborers, and thousands of workers contributed to its construction, using the finest materials available. As the years passed, Solomon's wisdom remained unmatched. He compiled Proverbs, penned songs, and recorded observations about life's complexities. His wisdom was a gift, but it also came with the weight of responsibility. The people of Israel revered him, but with great knowledge came great challenges. Though he had been granted extraordinary insight, he was still a man susceptible to temptation. As his reign continued, Solomon's wisdom and prosperity flourished. But the seeds of excess had been sown. The splendor of his court, the vast wealth, and the political marriages he formed for strategic alliances would eventually test his devotion. The king who had humbly sought wisdom was now surrounded by luxuries beyond measure. The question remained, would he remain faithful to the God who had given him everything, or would the temptations of power and abundance lead him astray? News of Solomon's wisdom spread when he resolved a dispute between two women claiming to be the mother of the same infant. His solution, to divide the baby in two, exposed the true mother, who pleaded to give up the child rather than see it harmed. The wisdom of Solomon became legendary, and his reputation grew beyond Israel's borders. The dispute had come before the king early one morning, the two women standing before him in the great hall of his palace. They were poor women, likely harlots, living in the same house. One woman claimed that the other had rolled over her own child in the night and, upon realizing the infant was dead, had switched it with the living baby. The second woman denied this, insisting that the living child was hers. With no witnesses, it was one woman's word against the other. Solomon, seated on his throne, watched them intently. Their voices were filled with grief and desperation, each clinging to the child and accusing the other. The court murmured, unsure of how the king would resolve such a perplexing case, but Solomon remained calm, his mind working swiftly through the possibilities. The truth was hidden in the emotions of the women, and it was there he would find his answer. After a pause, Solomon called for a sword. The murmuring ceased, and all eyes turned toward him in shock. The guards obeyed, placing a gleaming blade before him. Solomon spoke with authority. Cut the living child in two, and give half to one and half to the other. A gasp rippled through the court. The women's eyes widened in horror. Then, in an instant, the first woman threw herself to the ground and cried, "No, please, my lord, give the baby to her, just don't kill him." The second woman, however, remained silent for a moment before saying coldly, "Let it be neither mine nor yours, divide him." Solomon rose to his feet. The answer was clear. He pointed to the woman who had pleaded for the child's life. "Give the baby to her," he declared. "She is his mother." A cheer erupted in the court. The wisdom of Solomon had been revealed. The news of his judgment spread across the kingdom and beyond, drawing admiration and awe. People marveled at how he had discerned the truth, not through evidence or testimony, but by understanding a mother's love. But this was only the beginning of Solomon's legendary wisdom. Throughout his reign, he was sought after as the ultimate judge and arbitrator. He established an intricate judicial system, appointing magistrates and officials to ensure that justice was upheld throughout Israel. His insights into human nature allowed him to settle disputes with unparalleled fairness. He understood that justice was not merely about law, but about compassion and discernment. Solomon's wisdom extended far beyond legal matters. His ability to resolve disputes and see into the hearts of men and women made him an invaluable diplomat. Kings and rulers from distant lands sent emissaries to seek his counsel. His reputation as a wise and just ruler brought great respect to Israel, strengthening alliances and fostering an era of peace and prosperity. The king also devoted himself to teaching wisdom. He compiled proverbs and reflections, sharing insights on life, morality, and the nature of humanity. These teachings would later become part of the sacred texts of Israel, guiding generations to come. He spoke of the dangers of folly, the rewards of discipline, and the pursuit of righteousness. Yet, while his wisdom brought him renown, it also came with challenges. The people of Israel held him in awe, but as his power grew, so did the expectations placed upon him. Could even the wisest of men remain steadfast when tested by the weight of power and wealth? For now, Solomon stood firm in his wisdom, but the seeds of temptation were being sown, waiting for their time to take root. Solomon's reign marked the height of Israel's power and prosperity. Unlike his father David, who was a warrior king, Solomon was a ruler of peace, known for his wisdom and ability to maintain stability within the kingdom. His strategic diplomacy, economic policies, and grand architectural projects ushered in an era of unparalleled success. One of Solomon's earliest acts as king was to solidify Israel's alliances with neighboring nations. Understanding the importance of diplomatic ties, he engaged in treaties with powerful rulers, securing peace through marriage alliances. Among his many wives were daughters of Egyptian pharaohs and princesses from Moab, Ammon, Edom, Sidon, and the Hittite kingdoms. These marriages not only prevented potential conflicts, but also facilitated trade and cultural exchange between Israel and its neighbors. Trade flourished under Solomon's rule. He established a vast network of commerce, partnering with the Phoenicians, who were master sailors and traders. Through his alliance with King Hiram of Tyre, Solomon secured skilled artisans and the finest materials, including cedar and cypress wood, used in his ambitious construction projects. The port of Ezion-Geber, near the Red Sea, became a hub of maritime trade, allowing Israel to import gold, silver, ivory, spices, and exotic animals from distant lands such as Ophir and Sheba. The wealth generated from trade filled the kingdom's treasuries, enabling Solomon to invest in ambitious projects. One of his most notable achievements was the construction of the first temple in Jerusalem, a monumental endeavor that solidified Israel's spiritual and political identity. The temple, built over 7 years, was a marvel of craftsmanship, adorned with gold, bronze, and intricate carvings. It housed the Ark of the Covenant and became the central place of worship for the Israelites, symbolizing their covenant with God. Beyond the temple, Solomon commissioned the construction of grand palaces, fortified cities, and elaborate roadways. His royal palace in Jerusalem took 13 years to complete, reflecting the opulence and splendor of his court. Cities like Megiddo, Hazor, and Gezer were strengthened with defensive walls and military outposts, ensuring the security of the kingdom. Under Solomon's administration, governance was highly organized. He divided the kingdom into 12 districts, each responsible for providing resources and taxes to the royal court for 1 month of the year. This system ensured a steady supply of provisions and maintained economic balance throughout the land. His appointed officials, including governors, scribes, and treasurers, managed the kingdom's affairs with efficiency, allowing Solomon to focus on expanding his influence. However, with great wealth and expansion came growing challenges. The immense costs of his construction projects and lavish court required heavy taxation and forced labor. While Solomon's vision was grand, the burden on the common people grew, leading to murmurs of discontent. Farmers and laborers, who once thrived under the reign of David, found themselves struggling under the weight of royal demands. Despite these internal challenges, Solomon's wisdom remained the cornerstone of his rule. His reputation as a sage king attracted scholars and dignitaries from far and wide. He held councils where philosophical discussions flourished, addressing topics such as justice, morality, and the human condition. he compiled thousands of proverbs and poetic verses, many of which would later be preserved in the biblical book of Proverbs, Ecclesiastes, and Song of Songs. His ability to resolve complex disputes with unparalleled fairness further solidified his legend. He governed with a deep understanding of human nature, balancing justice with mercy. His teachings emphasized the pursuit of knowledge, the value of humility, and the fleeting nature of material wealth. Solomon's wisdom and grandeur extended beyond Israel, drawing the attention of powerful leaders worldwide. Stories of his wealth and intellect reached distant lands, prompting rulers and scholars to visit Jerusalem in admiration. Among the most famous visitors was the Queen of Sheba, who journeyed with a caravan laden with gold, spices, and precious stones to test Solomon's wisdom firsthand. The journey was treacherous and arduous. Her entourage of servants and camels laden with gifts traversed scorching deserts and rugged landscapes. The Queen of Sheba's determination to meet Solomon was fueled by her desire to discern whether his wisdom was truly divine or mere exaggeration. As she entered the gates of Jerusalem, she was greeted with sights of unparalleled grandeur. The gleaming temple, the lavish palace, the meticulously organized city, and the prosperity of its people. When she finally stood before Solomon in his grand court, she presented him with riddles, complex philosophical inquiries, and matters of governance and trade. These were not merely questions of curiosity, but trials meant to test whether Solomon's intellect was as profound as the stories claimed. To her astonishment, Solomon answered every question with clarity, insight, and depth beyond her expectations. His knowledge spanned not only matters of state and governance, but extended to philosophy, nature, and theology. Impressed beyond measure, the Queen of Sheba declared, "The reports I heard in my own land of your wisdom and wealth were true. Yet I did not believe them until I came and saw with my own eyes. Indeed, not even half of your wisdom was told to me. You exceed the fame of which I had heard." In admiration of his wisdom and the splendor of his kingdom, she lavished Solomon with gifts. She presented him with gold in great abundance, rare spices that had never been seen in Jerusalem before, and an array of exotic treasures from her land. In return, Solomon, a generous and diplomatic king, granted her all she desired and more. Their meeting was not merely an exchange of wealth, but also of ideas, strengthening the ties between their kingdoms. Beyond the material exchanges, their interactions symbolized the height of Solomon's influence. Sheba was a powerful and wealthy kingdom, and the visit signified the recognition of Israel's supremacy in wisdom and prosperity. The trade between their lands flourished, bringing new goods, cultures, and ideas into Israel's already thriving economy. The impact of her visit extended beyond her departure, as the relationship between the two kingdoms endured for years to come. The Queen of Sheba's encounter with Solomon left a lasting impression on both parties. In her own land, she carried the stories of his wisdom and leadership, elevating his legend even further. Some traditions even suggest that she bore a child by Solomon, founding a royal lineage that would persist for generations. Yet beneath the grandeur and accolades, the seeds of Solomon's downfall were subtly growing. His increasing wealth, his indulgence in luxury, and his numerous alliances through marriage were slowly leading him toward excess and complacency. His encounter with Sheba was a pinnacle moment, showcasing the greatness of his reign, but it also marked the beginning of an era where Solomon would begin to lose sight of the wisdom that had once defined him. Would the man who had amazed the Queen of Sheba with his intellect and governance be able to resist the temptations that came with such power? Or was this encounter a prelude to the gradual decline that awaited him? With Israel at the height of its prosperity, Solomon's reign seemed destined for eternal glory. However, the very success that defined his rule began to sow the seeds of his downfall. Wealth, power, and the allure of foreign alliances began to shift Solomon's priorities. What had once been a kingdom devoted to wisdom and righteousness was now becoming a palace of indulgence and excess. As his kingdom flourished, Solomon sought to strengthen his political power through strategic marriages. Over time, he amassed hundreds of wives and concubines, many from foreign lands. These marriages were not solely for pleasure, but were calculated moves to form alliances with surrounding nations: Egyptians, Moabites, Ammonites, Edomites, Sidonians, and Hittites. While these alliances provided peace and economic stability, they also brought foreign influences into the heart of Israel. These women brought with them their own gods, customs, and traditions, slowly diverting Solomon's focus from the Lord who had granted him wisdom. At first, Solomon maintained his devotion to God, continuing temple worship and adhering to Israel's laws. However, as time passed and the voices of his foreign wives grew louder, his heart began to waver. The opulence of the royal court, the vast treasures filling his halls, and the grandeur of his empire became distractions from the humility he once possessed. His wives, persuasive and persistent, convinced him to allow the construction of altars and high places for their gods: Baal, Ashtoreth, Chemosh, and Moloch. What began as tolerance slowly turned into participation. Solomon, once the beacon of wisdom, was now making compromises he would have never considered in his earlier years. The great king who had built the magnificent temple for the Lord was now erecting altars for pagan deities on the hills surrounding Jerusalem. The sight of these foreign shrines angered the faithful Israelites who had once looked upon their king as the wisest and most devout ruler in their history. The people murmured among themselves. The elders, who had once stood in awe of Solomon's wisdom, now whispered concerns about the path their king was taking. Priests who had served in the holy temple saw the hypocrisy of a ruler who worshipped both the God of Israel and the false gods of foreign nations. Solomon's heart, once devoted solely to righteousness, had become divided. With wealth came a demand for more. Solomon's lavish lifestyle required immense resources. The taxation of his people increased, and the once thriving labor force found itself burdened under the weight of the king's extravagant projects. Forced labor became commonplace as he demanded more workers for his endless pursuits: grand palaces, opulent gardens, fortified cities, and ships for his growing navy. His people, once united in admiration, now grumbled under the strain of their king's ambitions. Despite the murmurings, Solomon continued to revel in his grandeur. His court was filled with feasts, music, and entertainment that dazzled visitors from foreign lands. He surrounded himself with scholars, musicians, and poets who praised his achievements, ensuring that he heard only what pleased him. The once humble king, who had sought divine wisdom in his youth, now indulged in the belief that his kingdom's success was of his own making. Prophets began to emerge, warning of the consequences of his actions. They reminded Solomon of the covenant between God and Israel, warning him that idolatry and arrogance would bring ruin. But Solomon, drunk on power, dismissed their warnings as the ramblings of dissenters. Yet, despite his growing arrogance, there were moments when he felt the weight of his choices. Late at night, when the halls of his palace were silent, Solomon would wander through the corridors alone, staring at the city he had built. He would recall the days when he had first prayed for wisdom, when his heart had been pure, and when he had ruled with righteousness. But those moments of clarity were fleeting, drowned out by the clamor of his daily indulgences. The temptation of power had ensnared him. He had everything a man could desire: wealth beyond measure, influence over nations, a kingdom at peace. And yet, in his pursuit of more, he had begun to lose the one thing that had made him truly great: his devotion to God. The decline had begun, though Solomon did not yet see it. The choices he made in this period of indulgence would have lasting consequences, not just for him, but for the kingdom he had built. As Solomon continued to stray from his earlier devotion to God, his actions did not go unnoticed. The people murmured in distress, the priests grew anxious, and the prophets of Israel watched with sorrow. Solomon had become a man driven by ambition, indulgence, and an insatiable thirst for power. The very wisdom that had once defined his rule now seemed dulled by the lure of excess. But his fate had already been sealed, and divine judgment was on the horizon. One day, the prophet Ahijah came before Solomon with a grave message. Ahijah was known throughout Israel as a true prophet of the Lord, one who did not hesitate to speak the will of God, regardless of the consequences. His presence alone was enough to send ripples of tension through the royal court, for he carried with him the weight of divine revelation. Standing before Solomon, Ahijah spoke with solemn authority. "Because you have turned your heart away from the Lord, because you have allowed false gods to be worshipped in the land of Israel, the kingdom shall be torn from your hands. Your father David walked in righteousness, but you have abandoned the path. The Lord has spoken, and he will divide this kingdom after your death. Your son will not inherit all of Israel, but only a fragment of what was once united under David. The tribes shall be scattered, and chaos shall come upon the land.